Welcome to Study Time, a televised home learning program produced by Rwanda Education Board.
Hello students, a very warm welcome to the TV learning programs. I'm teacher Herbert, and I will be taking you through the biology lesson of Senior 2, Unit 9. And before we start our lesson, I would like to inform you to get a pen, a notebook, and you try to note some important words and concepts concerning about gaseous exchange in humans and in plants. That is Unit 9. And the lesson is lesson 1, which is the concept of respiration and respiratory surfaces. That is in human. We're going to talk about in human today. So I think everybody is ready to enjoy the lesson about gaseous exchange in human and as well as in plants. We're going to talk about respiration, respiratory surfaces. That is the lesson of today. The learning objective is to explain characteristics and adaptive features of the gaseous exchange surface. Objective number 2 is to define gaseous exchange and why is it important process in both in humans and as well as in plants. So I think everybody is ready to enjoy the lesson. The lesson is very, very enjoyable. You can enjoy it. Talking about what are the characteristics of the gaseous exchange, what are adaptive features of the gaseous exchange, how can we define a gaseous exchange, how is gaseous exchange differ from respiration, and why the gaseous exchange, is it an important process? So I think that everybody in Senior 1, you learned gaseous exchange in human beings. I know those who are in Senior 3, those who are in Senior 2, this is not a new lesson or that you've never studied. In Senior 1, you talked about gaseous exchange in human beings. Now we're going to talk about gaseous exchange in humans and as well as in plants. And how do you define gaseous exchange? What do you understand? How can you define gaseous exchange? What did you learn as the importance of gaseous exchange? So we have to go about it, and we try to know how to define gaseous exchange, what is the importance of the gaseous exchange, and now we go through that one. And I know it is not a new lesson. You did it in Senior 1. You talked about respiration as one of the characteristics of living things in Senior 1. So that is what you're going to discuss today. But before we start the lesson and talking about the importance of gaseous exchange, talking about how to define gaseous exchange, we have to look. I'm going to give you a cycle. You have to go about it and sit, and you try to observe and tell me, what do you see on the diagram? On that side, I have a plant, I have a cow, and I have a human being. Gaseous exchange cycle. You do remember, plants, they give us oxygen, we give them carbon dioxide. Gaseous exchange. We get carbon dioxide, a plant gets carbon dioxide from animals, as well as the plants gets carbon dioxide from animals. And also humans, animals, they get oxygen from plants. And that one brings what you call gaseous exchange cycle. That keeps oxygen, keeps the gaseous, this carbon dioxide, this nitrogen, these gases keeps circulating the oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen gas, all these one keeps what you call gaseous exchange. All right? The concept of respiration and respiratory surfaces. What is respiration? As I told you, we're going to discuss about respiration. We're going to talk about respiratory surfaces. Take your time and think about what is respiration, student. What do you understand by the term respiration? I know it is not the first time to hear the word respiration. You have ever heard it several times, many times. What is respiration? In senior one, you discussed it as one of the characteristics of living things. Now I want for you to take your time and think, what is respiration? How is respiration related to the respiratory surfaces? Related to the gaseous exchange? You enjoy the lesson. The lesson is just reminding us how gaseous exchange, what are respiratory surfaces, etc., etc. Let's have the definition. Respiration is a process where the food taken by an organism is burnt to produce energy required for their body functions, or the chemical breakdown of food to release energy. That one is referred as respiration. Once the food is taken into the body, it must be broken down. An organism is burnt, automatically that food must be burnt to produce energy, and that energy must be needed for the body functions. And I know during respiration, what happens? Oxygen is used and carbon dioxide is removed in our body. If you do remember, let me just give you an equation of respiration. When you talk about respiration is a reciprocal of photosynthesis. I know some of you do still remember those equations, two equations. Let me start with the respiration, the equation of respiration. As I said, it is a chemical breakdown of food to release energy, and an organ can to release energy, and that energy is going to be required for their body functions. Let's have the equation. You get, let me have a carbohydrate food, CH6, hydrogen 12, oxygen 6, plus oxygen. What will you get? You will get carbon dioxide plus water, then plus energy. And energy, remember, student, energy must be in form of ATP. Let me put it, ATP can just be maybe automatically 1 mole of glucose can release almost 338 energy ATP. Remember to balance the equation. This is 6. The equation, I think, is balanced. So that is, the glucose is going to be broken down. And after being broken down, the release of carbon dioxide, which is going to be used by the plant. And eventually, there is also release of energy in form of ATP. And that is going to be used is that energy that is going to be released during respiration. They are going to be used for their body functions. So during respiration, oxygen is used up. As I'm mentioning it here, the oxygen is used up. And carbon dioxide is removed out as a byproduct. So that is the equation of respiration. So that is to say oxygen is going to be consumed, is going to be used up. And carbon dioxide is going to be removed as a byproduct or as a waste product during the gaseous exchange or during respiration. And I mentioned that photosynthesis is a reciprocal of respiration. If you do remember, photosynthesis, then have equation for photosynthesis. You get the raw materials, you get carbon dioxide, plus water, and eventually what you are going to give, remember to add some arrows. There must be some conditions. We have sunlight, and also chlorophyll as the green pigment that helps to trap sunlight energy and is going to be stored in chloroplast. We have CH6, hydrogen 12, oxygen 6, which is a glucose, which is a carbohydrate. plus oxygen, which is going to be given out as a byproduct by that time. For the case of plants, you balance the equation. 6, 6, then 6. So that one involves what you call respiration. When we talk about cellular respiration, where does cellular respiration is constantly in all living cells? Cellular respiration. What is cellular respiration? Cellular respiration takes place constantly in all living things, and it creates a constant demand of oxygen and even the need to eliminate carbon dioxide gas. During cellular respiration, automatically, the cells need more oxygen and also need to eliminate the carbon dioxide gas, because if there is more accumulation of carbon dioxide, automatically in the cells, the pH in the cells increases. And once it increases, it affects the normal functioning of the cells. So it means once there is a constant high demand of oxygen, and it needs also to eliminate carbon dioxide gas. And that one brings what you call gaseous exchange. So what is gaseous exchange? We've talked about now respiration. A bright student, able to define respiration, and where necessary, you can also write a chemical equation for respiration. Now, what is gaseous exchange? What do you understand by the gaseous exchange? Student, take your time to think about it. It is a biological process through which these gases are transported through the body of an organism across a specialized respiratory surfaces. Here is the definition, as I mentioned it. What is gaseous exchange? I've talked about respiration. Now let's have a definition of gaseous exchange. It is a biological process through which these gases are transported through the body of an organism across a specialized respiratory surfaces. Organisms such as plants need to take in or to release oxygen and take in carbon dioxide at one time or at another time during respiration or during photosynthesis. So it means we need to take in oxygen one time when it is needed by the body. As I mentioned, oxygen is very important for the normal functioning of the cells. Also, plants need also to take in carbon dioxide and release out oxygen as a byproduct. Animals, on the other hand, always takes in oxygen, as I mentioned, and release carbon dioxide during respiration. So plants, they take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen as a byproduct. And for the case of animals, they take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide as a byproduct. So if we have to take the definition, here is the definition of gaseous exchange. A biological process through which these gases, I'm talking about carbon dioxide, oxygen, are transported through the body of an organism across a specialized respiratory surfaces. Gaseous exchange, therefore, is exchange of respiratory gases in animals. Not only in animals, exchange of photosynthetic and even respiratory gases in plants. Because, as I mentioned, these carbon dioxide are very important in the process of photosynthesis. Absence of the carbon dioxide, the plant cannot photosynthesize, cannot carry the process of photosynthesis. So, therefore, an efficient system for exchange of gases is extremely important in living organisms. Gaseous exchange is necessary because organisms are able to obtain useful gases for their environmental and get rid of the wastes into the body. So it means that these exchange of gases are very important because they help in the normal functioning of the cells. Not only that, it helps some of the organisms and some of the organs to get rid of waste gases into the environment, because that one keeps the environment having what we call a continuous circulation of these gases in the environment, and which of these gases are very essential for plant growth, for making some of the body structures, and etc. The environment that organisms exchanges gases with includes Where do we normally exchange these gases? These gases. We have air for some organisms, and even can get it from the water medium. And I mentioned it that air is the main source of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So, as you do remember that the atmospheric air has a certain percentage of oxygen, which is ranging to 0.03% of carbon dioxide, and it must be having a certain percentage of oxygen and even nitrogen and inert gases. So what makes that air, I said air is the main source of oxygen and even carbon dioxide. Organ that lives on land exchange these gases directly with air. We normally get oxygen from the air, as you know it very well. Oxygen and other gases from the air diffuses into lakes, rivers, and even oceans. The air dissolved in water is used for gas exchange by organ that lives in water. There are some aquatic organisms that lives in water. They extract oxygen from water that is found there in that water bodies. So some of the marine organisms or aquatic organisms, they extract air that has been dissolved in water and is used for gas exchange by organ that lives in that water bodies. Let me say they are living in rivers, lakes, and even in oceans. They are able to extract oxygen from water bodies. Large multicellular organisms, we talk about, we have unicellular organisms, single-cellular organisms that are made up of one cell. And we have multicellular organisms, what we call complex organisms, where we also belonging in those complex organisms. I think everybody's getting what I'm talking about. Large multicellular animals, the surface area to the volume ratio is small. Let me just use two things that everybody can be able to understand. We have the size of the amoeba. Everybody knows what you call amoeba, a unicellular organism, not a multicellular organism. We have bacteria, which are also unicellular organisms. We have a complex organ. Take an example like human beings. When it comes to gaseous exchange, we talk about what we call surface area to the volume ratio. The amoeba, in terms of the size, it is very small, but it has got what we call large surface area to the volume ratio. Humans, take an example like elephants and human, they have what we call small surface area to the volume ratio, and that one affects what we call gaseous exchange. What makes it to the surface, our surface to be having a small surface area to the volume ratio? Our body is having what we call very many blood tissues, very many cells. That one decreases our surface area. So oxygen cannot diffuse directly. We must be having what we call specialized respiratory surfaces. Take an example, we can have the lungs, we can have the tracheas, we can have some they use the trachea system, some they use the gills, some they use the spiracles, and etc. But these small organisms, unicellular organisms, they don't have specialized respiratory surfaces. They can use their body as long as they are in contact with the environment where oxygen is available. They are able to extract that oxygen from water by the process of diffusion. I know some of you do remember what is diffusion? Movement of molecules or ions, okay, from a higher concentration to a lower concentration down the concentration gradient as a result of random movement. So they are able to diffuse. They are able to diffuse into their body. So I mentioned that diffusion, as I mentioned, the diffusion of gases alone is not efficient enough in moving gases to and from the cells. Therefore, large multicellular animals have specialized structures or organs with a special surface over which gaseous can take place, as I mentioned it. They must be having what we call a specialized structures or organ for gaseous exchange. These special surfaces are called respiratory surfaces. These special structures, special organs that are able to carry out gaseous exchange are referred to as respiratory surfaces. Examples of specialized structures for gaseous exchange in animals include the following. They can use the cell membrane as a respiratory surface. As I mentioned, they can use the trachea systems For example, the insect, they can use the tracheal system. They can use the buccal cavity. Take an example, the frogs. They can use the buccal cavity. And biology, you can talk about the buccal cavity. It means the mouth. They can as well use the skin. As long as the skin is moisture, it is able to carry out what you call gaseous exchange. That's why frogs, they are found in water-rich places. But how they carry out gaseous exchange? Because the skin is moisture and oxygen can diffuse very fast. All right? So we have gills that are normally found in fish, lungs in mammals and birds and reptiles and even amphibians. So the mammals, the birds and amphibians and reptiles, they use the lungs. Gaseous exchange takes place over respiratory surfaces. As I mentioned, these respiratory surfaces, the gills, the tracheal system, the lungs, all these are respiratory surfaces. Respiratory surfaces has a number of characteristics that makes it to be efficient for gaseous exchange. I mentioned that we are going to see what are the characteristics that makes an efficient for a respiratory surfaces to carry out gaseous exchange. There must be some of the characteristics. There must be some of the adaptations. Some of these characteristics, we're going to go through the number of them. We have number one, which is called thin. The thinner the membrane, the faster the rate of diffusion. The thicker the membrane, the slower the rate of diffusion. Number two, I talked about what you call moisture. As the surface area is moisture, to diffuse gases, the diffusion will be very easily across it. We have another one which is called large surface area to the volume. There is a large surface area, there's a maximum gaseous exchange. The smaller the surface area, the smaller the rate of gaseous exchange, in simple terms. So I think we are able to understand. The last one, in animals with transport system, the respiratory surface has rich of blood capillaries. High number of blood capillaries, what you call high vascularized, that quickens transport of gases to and from the cell. That one, what you call the number of blood capillaries, enables the transport of gases along from one cell to another cell. So that is what I've been talking about, one of these characteristics that makes efficient gaseous exchange along an organism. I mentioned the thinner the walls, the faster the diffusion of gases across it. I talked about the moisture, the skin. We have to mention about what you call frogs. Frogs are normally found in what you call in a moisture area. Their skin is moisture. They don't need structures, special structures for gaseous exchange. As long as they're in contact with the environment where oxygen is available, they can diffuse very easily because of moisture to diffuse gases as they diffuse across it. It has large surface area. As I mentioned, large surface area for maximum gaseous exchange. Smaller surface area, so the rate of diffusion of gases. In animals with a transport system, the respiratory surface has a rich supply of blood capillaries, highly vascularized, quickly transport gases to and from the cell. Not all respiratory surfaces are in direct contact with the medium through which gases can occur, such as water or around the organism. Therefore, they need the process that can ensure a continuous. Not all these organisms, not all respiratory surfaces must be in direct contact with the medium through which gaseous exchange can occur, that occurs. That is very clear. Such as water or air. For us, whenever we are in contact with the environment, the oxygen cannot diffuse into our skin directly. We must be having what we call specialized structures, specialized structures or organs that will enable to carry out gaseous exchange. Therefore, they need the process that ensures a continuous supply of fresh water or air to and from respiratory surfaces. And this one is achieved by what you call ventilation. When I talk about ventilation, what does it mean? It involves what you call inhalation and exhalation, taking in air and out air from our body. And that one brings what you call gaseous exchange, which is a continuous brings water or air containing more oxygen to the respiratory surface. That is inhalation and exhalation. All right? So that one brings what you call inhalation, ventilation. Involves what you call inhalation and exhalation. So that is, it also removes water or air containing a lot of carbon dioxide. And that one is from it. Ventilation, therefore, is important. It is important because it maintains a high diffusion gradient at the respiratory surface. Talk about concentration gradient, that is differences in concentration. Environment where there's high concentration of oxygen can diffuse into our body. Depending on our body where there is less concentration of oxygen. I know some of you know what you call pressure must be inversely proportional to the volume. Once the pressure inside increases, that one increases what you call inhalation. And once the pressure inside our body decreases, that one increases what you call exhalation. We bring what you call diffusion gradient at the respiratory surface. It also ensures high rate of gaseous exchange. That is, breathing is an example of ventilation because, you know, breathing is a mechanism that involves what you call inhalation and exhalation. So, student, here there is a lesson assessment. We have to assess ourselves. What we have discussed. What role does the nasal passages and the diaphragm play in gaseous exchange? Number 2, describe the characteristics of respiratory surface. We have discussed about the characteristics of respiratory surface. I know everybody is able to explain the characteristics of respiratory surfaces. Number 3, describe the mechanism by which carbon dioxide in the blood capillaries around the alveolar passes into alveoli and finally is exhaled out. That is a lesson assessment, and I think you'll just do it. And thank you for your for watching and active participation, and for being with me in my lesson. And I remind you to stay home safe, and remember to wash your hands with clean water and a soap, and enjoy the rest of the day. See you next time.